Okay, well, Hutch just spoke about the union bureaucracy's subordination to the Democratic Party, and you don't have to be in a union to know about that, but if you're in a union, you really know about it. And try talking about it. So what reaction is it that you may hear? People will say, isn't this the way things are done, or how else do we get reforms? And what do we say? Revolution now? Well, generally not. But we do struggle to make the fight for reforms a real step in the road towards workers' power. We insist that each fight for reforms can be a way to strengthen the consciousness and the organization of working people independent of the boss's parties. Instead of being an episode of subordination to the boss's parties, the fight for reforms can bring ever greater layers of working people into motion, feeling their own power as a collective force. That experience comes fastest when large numbers of people are in motion at once, massed in streets and demonstrations or in collective strike actions. So what role can we play in uniting the working class for actions like this, independent of the Democratic Party? How do we reach working people ready to fight for reforms with a larger message of their independent power? And how do revolutionary-minded socialists get a hearing from working people fighting over bread and butter and other issues of immediate concern? This is the basic question facing revolutionary socialists for over 100 years. The historic answer is called the United Front. At moments of crisis, like the rise of fascist paramilitary attacks or a precipitous drop in standards of living, a sizable portion of the working class will naturally want all workers' organizations to collaborate in their defense. In Germany, during the rise of fascism, for example, workers, whether they looked to the reformist social democracy or to forces farther to the left, were demanding united actions in the streets and coordination for their self-defense. Revolutionaries advocated that all the leaderships of the workers' organizations form a united front, independent of the ruling classes, to fight back. Neither of the major workers' parties' leaderships listened to their ranks. Social Democrats continued to advocate reliance on liberal bourgeois forces, and the Communist Party called the Social Democrats social fascists, implying that these reformist socialists were worse than the bourgeoisie themselves. This refusal of the communists to unite in effective fight-back coalitions, the Social Democrats demoralized the ranks of the working class and decapitated a possible response to fascism in the streets. The result was the complete crushing of the largest workers' movement in the world and the victory of fascism. Things unfolded in similar, if not quite so devastating ways in France and other countries in the 30s. Instead of an independent class response to the rise of fascist threats that might have led to working class revolution, the Stalinized Communist Party, which in Germany was ultra-left towards a united front with the Social Democrats, now swung in the opposite direction. They led the working class into a faithful collaboration with the boss's parties, called the Popular Front. It sealed the road to the unprecedented calamity of World War II, in which millions of world's workers perished for a capitalist redivision of the global spoils. So what does this have to do with us? Today, while all the top union leadership wants to tie us to the Democratic Party, millions of workers are looking for ways to fight back. There are no revolutionary socialist organizations in the U.S. large enough and rooted enough to head such a fight back on their own. But we can play a critical role in establishing the method of the united front in our own time. Working people can and will support the formation of coalitions for action in the streets that are not tied to electoral or legislative maneuvering. And the reformist leaderships will be part of such coalitions under pressure. In the process of struggling to keep these coalitions independent, hundreds of thousands of militant workers will learn how to become more politically effective. In the meetings and conventions that are part of this process, they will develop their own voice. There is one small but potent example. But first, I want to give a different example. When I was asked to talk about the United Front, my mind went back to the one United Front that I remember from a long time ago. One of the largest and most powerful I've experienced, and that was a United Front to end the war in Vietnam. And all the organizations and individuals who wanted to end that war joined together and were able to put millions of people in the streets demanding to bring the troops home now. More recently, a smaller and sort of potent example is in Oregon. But we did work to build a united front to advance the fight for 15. For 2 years, we held together a formation that could put workers and campaigners in the streets. The leadership included activists from modestly sized left parties, Socialist Action, International Socialist Organization, Socialist Alternative, Workers' Action, along with unaffiliated union activists and low-wage workers. We had rallies and pickets around the state, and our example resulted in us getting support from, substantial support from some unions. While at the beginning, most unions gave paper endorsements for 15, the strongest support with rank and file representatives on the steering committee and or activists on the ground were a select few, although it wasn't that few. We had the support of UE, the United Electrical Workers, LIUNA, the Labor's International Union, PACUN, which is Oregon's Farm Workers Union, NALC, which is the National Association of Letter Carriers, the Oregon Federation of Nurses and Health Professionals, OSCA, Oregon School Employees Association, and two big public and private unions, SEIU and AFSCME. In addition, LIUNA was bargaining contracts and organizing part-time city workers. They invited us to make the presentations at bargaining tables for the $15 an hour floor for their workers. We also worked with them to organize raucous demonstrations at Portland City Hall and to fill, many times, the city council chambers when LIUNA workers were testifying. We also participated in a very fun action with the city zoo workers, and I can tell zoo workers are very fun. And we helped to paste Zoolarity stickers, Zoolarity for 15 on just about all the children that attended the zoo that day. And we started a ballot initiative for 15 to try to get out in front of the Democrats. In the end, we failed to completely outflank a less audacious legislative effort for a higher minimum wage. But we set an example, and we created the experience for many rank-and-file workers. All these little experiences add up. Think about what just happened with the National Fight for 15 movement. Probably the biggest surprise to me of this election season was the fact that the workers on the National Organizing Committee for the Fight for 15 made a decision not to endorse candidates, specifically the pressure I'm sure was on presidential candidates, but to continue their strikes and expand into southern states. Almost unprecedented. Notice, this decision was made by strike leaders who had been involved in action independent of the Democratic Party for 3 years. It then was ratified unanimously at the Fight for 15 in a union convention in Richmond in August. Someday, a sufficient number of rank-and-file unionists will have experienced just enough to guide the fight for more authoritative united fronts to confront the employer's assault. Socialists like you will likely be able to play a decisive role in those events. Let's take a look again at Wisconsin, very popular with this panel, because it was very important. What could have happened if rank-and-file workers and socialists were successful in pushing for a real united front in that struggle? Let's look at the facts. Early on, one predominantly blue-collar county labor council passed a resolution unanimously to support a one-day strike of public workers. Now, let me just tell you, as a public worker, to have blue-collar workers standing up and tell public workers, I have your back, this is unique. At the apex of statewide public support around the state, there was a rally of 100,000 workers at the Capitol in Madison. It included farmers driving their farm equipment, I think it's called, around the Capitol and blocking traffic for the rally. This was the point, a rally of 100,000 people, at which the union leadership's betrayal that Hush talked about happened. At this rally, they announced they were sending everyone out around the state to do the bidding of the Democrats to get signatures for a recall of the governor. If there had been ongoing struggles with victories that empowered them as a class over the years preceding the upsurge, if a layer of workers had had more experience with organizing independent of the democratic machine, and if these experiences had been ongoing with activists and unions organizing rank-and-file struggles, big and small, over time, then all these experiences could have given the ranks the confidence to push back against the union leadership who were taking them back into the democratic fold at the time when 100,000 workers had traveled to Madison in the snow to show their solidarity and undoubtedly were waiting to see what the next step was. A secondary union leadership, schooled in the historic lessons of our movement, might have assembled the ranks in large enough numbers to force the top leadership to hold back. In such a situation, mass meetings and marches, an organized socialist movement could share big lessons of past working class struggles in Wisconsin, the nation, and the world. A layer of working class leaders involved over time in independent activity in the streets, like those in Ohio recently did, might logically come to the conclusion that the Democrats were not their party and that they should join the demonstrations with labor candidates for office, and perhaps even the formation of a labor party. In truth, every upsurge over the economic attacks, every fight for climate justice, every fight against imperialist war, every fight against police brutality and mass incarceration has the potential to be enlarged, enriched, transformed by the application of the United Front concept. We, and I should say you, can play a role in putting together effective coalitions that can demonstrate in a small way what must be done. The huge missing link in Wisconsin and most other situations where there is a potential fight back was and is an ongoing, organized, socialist working class that can transmit working class history. Even a small, non-sectarian socialist group can be critical in the effort to make the potential a reality. This is what happened in the 1930s, a decade in which the Socialist Party, the Communist Party, and the anti-Stalinist left together helped develop the rank-and-file leadership that drove the organization of millions of industrial workers into unions for the first time. So the question now is, what kind of socialist organizations can play this role today?